everyone. I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Welcome to this week's History is Lunch program, which is sponsored by the John and Lucy Shackelford Charitable Fund of the Community Foundation for Mississippi. We're in our home, the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium in the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, and we are streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube. And of course, you can watch this program on either one of those platforms after it's over. If you have not already done so, please silence your phone. For anyone looking for a fun road trip on Friday, March 24th, from 3:30 to 5:30 at the Grand Village of the Natchez, members of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians will demonstrate traditional dances and the game of stickball. That program is free, but you want to bring a lawn chair or a blanket. And then on the evening of Tuesday, March 28th, we'll partner with the Goldring-Woldenberg Institute of Southern Jewish Life for the Mississippi Freedom Seder. That participatory program will feature rituals, readings, songs, and food. Tickets are available on the MDAH website. Finally, I hope you'll come back next Wednesday for a History is Lunch program with Pip Gordon when he will present The Welcome, Hubert Creekmore's lost novel. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Rick Cleveland and Bailey Howell for a March Madness-themed History is Lunch. Bailey Howell, a high school All-American in Tennessee, just across the state line, played basketball at Mississippi State University and led that team to a 64-14 record during his 3 years as a starter. His career averages of 27.1 points and 17 rebounds are still school records. In 1958 and 1959, Howell was the SEC's most valuable player and an All-American. And in his senior season, he led the Bulldogs to the conference championship and a number 3 ranking nationally. You would think that that might lead to the tournament, but there are reasons it didn't, and they'll talk about that today. Howell was selected second overall by the Detroit Pistons in the NBA draft and went on to play 12 years for 4 teams, including the Boston Celtics squads that won the 1968 and 1969 league titles. He is a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Rick Cleveland is a sports columnist with Mississippi Today. He earned his BS in journalism from the University of Southern Mississippi and has worked for the Monroe, Louisiana News Star World, Jackson Daily News, and Clarion Ledger, and was the sports editor for the Hattiesburg American. Cleveland is the former executive director of the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame and has been recognized 14 times as Mississippi Sports Writer of the Year. Help me welcome Rick Cleveland and Bailey Howell.
Thank you.
That sounded pretty ominous.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Thank y'all for coming. It's what an honor it is here to sit up here and interview the best basketball player in the history of our state.
If y'all know Rick, you know how he has a tendency to exaggerate, by the way.
Now, Bailey, I don't have to exaggerate where you're concerned. People talk all the time now about when somebody gets a double-double in one game of basketball. Man, they scored more than 10 points and got more than 10 rebounds in the same game. This man averaged 27 points and 17 rebounds for his career. It's just unbelievable, baby. And there was no shot clock, so a lot of times when his coach, Bailey McCarthy, got the lead, they sat on the basketball the rest of the game. He probably in today's game would average, 40 and 25? What do you think, Bailey?
Not hardly. I mean, the situation was set up by Coach McCarthy that I did most all of the shooting. So the guys that played with me wasn't, of course, everybody loves to shoot the basketball. but they didn't get to shoot very much. And we often, as you say, when we got a lead, we would start freezing the ball. And once the other team got real anxious trying to steal the ball, it would generally create an opportunity for me to score. So that's one reason I was able to average the points that I did.
Bailey, we got a lot of history to cover here today, but we're going to start with some recent history because I know, besides being the greatest player in Mississippi State history, you're also the biggest Bulldog basketball fan I know. And I know you were glued to the TV last night. I thought that game was just sort of a microcosm of their season.
Right.
Talk about
State had a good year. We're proud of it, but of course you always want more. As a fan, you never want them to throw the ball away. You never want them to miss a shot or commit a foul or whatever. But they really was a special team, I think. But they're lacking in some areas, primarily shooting the basketball.
that hurts.
Yeah. You know, and the three-point shot, I don't like it at all because most of the time the other team makes more than we do. And that makes it hard to overcome and win the game.
You're not exaggerating. There are 363 teams that played NCAA Division I basketball.
Yeah.
State ranked 363rd in three-point shooting. The fact that they won 23 games, despite that, says a lot about, I think, the coaching and how hard they played. They played
the effort, hard. Yeah. They have a lot of fine young men, and they really bought into the coaching style of Coach Sands, and they had a successful year. Of course, as I say, you always the game. If you watched it last night, it was a sort of a pattern. Sometimes we'd get off to a good start, then the other team would catch us and maybe go ahead, and then we would get busy and maybe come back, and then the game could go either way, just whoever made the last shot, and that's what happened to us last night.
Yeah. All right, now we're going to talk about some way back history. Today is the 60th anniversary of what they call the Game of Change. 60 years ago tonight, Mississippi State played Loyola in the first time a Mississippi team ever competed in the NCAA tournament. It wasn't Babe's best team because I think you played on some of Babe's best teams and you never got an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. And you've told me on more than one occasion that that's one of the biggest disappointments of your life is the fact that you were not allowed to measure yourself against the other best teams in the country.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Well, we were ranked third in the nation. Not only were we the best team in the SEC, we were the best team in all of the southern United States. And back then, only 16 teams went to the NCAA. Now it's 64 plus play-in. They had 16 teams, and they had a play-in game or two, I think, best I remember. But all we had to do, this SEC, because of Kentucky's success, got a bye the first round. So you only had to win 2 games to get to the Final Four. And the first game you played would be against a play-in team that wasn't expected to be that good. And so I think if they would have allowed us to go to the tournament, we would have definitely been in the Final Four. And then you take your chances then, of course. But it was a disappointment, a big disappointment. It actually, I could be very bitter about it, but that's only what hurt me, you know. So Coach McCarthy at the time said, look, there's going to be lots of national press on the campus, so be careful what you say and go to class and get your degree, you know, whatever. So back then, when adults told you or asked you to do certain things, you did it. You did.
So 60 years ago tonight, where were you when State finally did get?
I was at the game.
You were at the game?
Yeah, I was with the Detroit Pistons at the time in the NBA. My wife and I and Jackie Moreland, another guy from Louisiana that was on the Celtic team, we and our wives went to the game. And Sports Illustrated, you know, they had a double page of the jump balls that started the game. And I can pick out myself and Jackie and our wives in the stands. Babe got us real good tickets, and so, but it was another disappointment.
Well, it was, you know, I remember listening to it on the radio at my kitchen table in Hattiesburg with my daddy, and it was a really close game. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I think the final margin was 10, but it wasn't that. It was really close.
Yeah, we led the game at one point, and but they came back. They went on and won the NCAA championship, so they wasn't, you know, they were a legitimate great team.
And State was too, because State beat Nate Thurman.
Yeah.
In the consolation game the next night,
right.
Without one of their best players.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won back then. Then they played a consolation game, and State won that.
Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit about Babe McCarthy, the architect, the one who led State to all that basketball success. For those that don't know, back then Kentucky just kind of had been in complete control of the league until with Adolph Rupp, until State came along, until Babe McCarthy came along and changed all that. What made him so successful?
Well, he was a great personality. He knew basketball, but great coaches to me are not great X and O people. They're people that know how to treat people, how to handle people, and so you really wanted to play for him. I mean, and he was a great recruiter, and was the secret, I think, to his success, because you can't win championships without good players. And he hit the recruiting trail when he got the job at State. He actually visited me in my hometown of Middleton, Tennessee, more than all the other coaches combined. He had coached basketball in the service. You know, he was a pilot well, I guess it was the Army Air Force then. And he had coached a young man from Corinth, Mississippi, who was a Major League Baseball player. He sent him by my home, brought his wife and his 2 little boys to visit my parents, and so he was just ahead of his time in recruiting. For example, the way Kentucky recruited at that time, Harry Lancaster, their assistant, came to see me play. He met my parents, and after the game, he said, we're offering Bailey a scholarship. I'll make it official when I get back to Lexington. I'll send you a letter making it official. And that was the way Kentucky recruited at that point. And because they just, if you got an offer to go to Kentucky, everybody normally would snap that up. You know?
It was more like an invitation.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And but Babe hit the recruiting trail, and he put together some really fine teams for 10 years. During that 10-year period of time, Mississippi State won 4 SEC championships, or tied for them, but they beat the team that was tied with them. So basically, they were SEC champions for 4 years.
Were you in the gym the night that Rupp brought Kentucky in there and somebody put a skunk under his jersey?
Yeah, I played in that game. Yeah.
Do you remember the ruckus?
No, I don't. I wasn't even aware of it. You know, we were concentrating on the game, and that all occurred right before the game started. You know, so.
Some state students had been out hunting that day, and they, I guess somebody shot a skunk, and they saw, well,
Actually, they found it on the road, I think.
was it?
Yeah, it had been run over, and they picked it up and put it in a paper sack, and they came in.
Somebody wrote me a letter and said he was the guy that shot the skunk, so that tells you.
Oh, really?
Anyway.
That would have made him a celebrity, huh?
Anyway.
How long did it take to find it?
It happened. Somebody slipped it in when the teams went into, you know how they warm up, then they go in the locker room, and then they come back out.
Yeah.
When they went in the locker room, somebody slipped it under his chair, and apparently it didn't take him very long to find it.
Well, the gymnasium at State at that time, by the way, they're tearing it down and replacing it with another building. But
Oh, no.
yeah,
Hate that.
it's historic, you know. But the coaches sat on the sidelines naturally, one on one side of the scores table and one on the other, the teams. But when Kentucky came to play, Babe put his bench at the end of the court, so you come out of the dressing room and he had to walk all the way down to the other end of the court for his bench. And the students marched him all the way down there. You know, anything to upset Rupp, Babe kind of had it planned and executed. And I think probably Mississippi State was Rupp's least favorite place to come and play.
Yeah, little wonder. How loud was that place?
Well, we were about, our dorm was 200 or 300 yards from the gym, or farther, maybe farther than that. But we'd leave our dormitory to go get ready for the game, hour and a half before the game, and it would already be full with people having their cowbells in there, and they were constantly ringing them. So it was really loud.
I've heard that you could actually feel the vibration.
I'm sure you could, yeah.
Okay, so you finish your career at State, and you're the second pick of the NBA draft.
Right.
Who was number one?
a guy named Bob Boozer who played at Kansas or Kansas State. Cincinnati had the first draft choice. They had finished last in the league, so the team that finished last has the first pick and so on. And Cincinnati came to visit and said they wanted to draft me. How much would I play for? And I told them a figure that I needed to turn pro. And they said, Bailey, we can't pay you that kind of money. And so I said, well, I probably will play AAU ball. Back then, the amateur league, AAU league, was really strong. They played a 50-game schedule. They trained you in their company for a lifetime job, and you played basketball for them for, 8 or 10 years. And the winner of the AAU league every Olympic year was able to put 5 players on the Olympic team, So it was a very good deal for you and your future, really. And I was seriously considering that. But I was returning to Starkville from, I think I'd been to visit my wife in Baton Rouge. She wasn't my wife yet, my fiancée. And I heard on the radio that I'd been drafted by the Detroit Pistons.
Now players, the second pick in the draft, I don't know what they get, probably $20 million signing bonus. What'd you get back then?
Number one draft choice is made between $7,500 and $15,000. Back in those days, we had to buy, my first year in the league, we had to buy our own shoes. They didn't even furnish your shoes for you. Per diem, when you went on the road, your per diem was $7 a day. So
They didn't have Happy Meals back then.
of course, we made more money than we would have in another occupation, but it was really, the league was struggling. The New York Knicks had money. The Detroit Pistons had money. They were owned by the Zollner Corporation out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, that made pistons for trucks and, but the rest of the league was struggling, they just made it paycheck to paycheck, so to speak. We played one game in Cincinnati one Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I can't remember, and there was only 200 or 300 people in the stands, stuff like that. The league was really struggling. At that time, there was 8 teams, 4 in the East and 4 in the West, and we play in the West, Cincinnati, Detroit, Minneapolis, and St. Louis. We played every team in the West 13 times a year. And we played every team in the East 9 times a year. So people ask me, who was the greatest player you ever played against? Well, I had to play against Bob Pettit, a great player out of LSU, 13 times the first few years. And Elgin Baylor, who was with Minneapolis, 2 of the greatest of all time. you had to face them 13 times a year. Now they play each other about twice. There's 32 teams.
Yeah.
And often the teams could draw a better crowd on Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. You never played two games in the same place back to back. So you might be in St. Louis on Friday night playing the Hawks. You may be in New York on Saturday night playing the Knicks, and then you would be back maybe in Detroit on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock for a home game. Well, you had to lie to your legs a lot, saying, if you'll just let me play one more game, I'll never ask you to do this again.
So how many years were you with the Pistons?
5 years. Then there was a big trade. The Baltimore Bullets, who had been the Chicago Zephyrs, and the Detroit almost traded total teams. There was 12 guys involved in the trade between the two teams. So I ended up in Baltimore a couple of years, and the Baltimore team is now the Washington team. But then I got traded from Baltimore to the Celtics.
Well, I was going to ask you, when you were with the Pistons and then Baltimore, what did you think of the Celtics during those years?
Well, you had great respect for them because they won 8 championships in a row, if you can imagine that. And then their coach, Red Auerbach, retired. And then that summer is when I was traded to Boston. And then Bill Russell was a player coach at that point. They made him the player coach. Red called Russ into his office and said, Russ, we've got to name a new coach, but we've got to name someone that you'll be willing to play for. Because Russell, the most valuable player, I think, that's ever walked on the court, he and Red had a great relationship, and Red knew that Russell was very familiar with Russell, of course, and he knew that he had to approve of the coach. You know, so he said, who will you play for? And he said, well, I'll play for Frank Ramsey, who used to play with the Celtics. He was a college player out of Kentucky, and he was with the Celtics for quite a few years. And Frank Ramsey was from Kentucky. He owned a bank in Kentucky. He lived on the golf course. When he retired, it was over for him. So he turned the job down. So since Russell wouldn't play for anybody else, they named him the player coach.
And one of the first things he did was he wanted you.
That summer, yeah. Late that summer, the Baltimore Bullets, who I was with at the time, we had 6 forwards but no center on the team. And we had so they were looking for what they hoped would be a really NBA center, you know. Well, there was a guy that played with Boston, Mel Counts, but he never got to play because Russell played the whole game. But Red had promoted him a lot around the league about this guy. It's a shame, but he doesn't get to play, but he would be a really good center, you know, for the league. So the Bullets made the trade. They offered me and another guy to the Celtics for them to take their choice of who. And Russell picked me.
I think that was because you had given him, I mean, he's one of the greatest rebounders that ever lived, but you got more than your share when you played against him.
There wasn't a lot of rebounds when they available with him out there. You know, he once got 41 rebounds in a playoff game. So he was down. Back then, without the three-point shot, the centers were the dominant guy on the floor. You know, if you had a great center, you had an opportunity to have really a great team. Today, of course, they put the three-point shot in so that the shorter guys would have an opportunity to play basketball with the giants, you know. So, but now the big guys are running around on the perimeter shooting the three-point shot, you know, and very few teams really go to the center for their scoring, you know. If you watch the NBA today, each team is putting up about 40 to 45 three-point shots, you know.
College basketball, really.
Yeah, some college teams even are doing that. And so they say, of course, that when they were putting it in, they said they will add more variety to the game. But all you see now is mostly three-point shooting and a few dunks along the way, you know.
That's right.
And the beautiful game of basketball, give and go and all, beautiful plays when you have the numbers in your favor, 3-on-2 on a fast break or 2-on-1, and the ball handling and the exchange of passes and the layup. You don't see much of that anymore. And if you've got the numbers today, they'll stop behind the three-point line and put up a three-pointer, you know. And so
A few moments, you've told me this in the past, but a few moments ago you said you thought that Bill Russell was the most valuable player that ever walked on the court. What made him the most valuable player?
well, he was a great competitor, of course. He wasn't that interested in scoring. He was a great rebounder. He was 6'9", but he had 41-inch arms. So that really made him about a 7-footer. But he was a great athlete, you know. And he made the game easier for everybody else on the floor. And he was always, we would throw the ball into him, but he didn't look to shoot. He was looking for people who might be open. So he was a team player and a winner and a competitor. And, of course, he had some good guys playing with him, but they won 8 world championships in a row at one time.
Talk about the rivalry between he and
Wilt.
Wilt. Yeah, there you go.
Well, Wilt claimed he was 7 feet and 1/16 inch tall, he said. But he was actually 7'3" at least, you know. He was bigger and stronger than Russell, and if he would have played the game like he should have played it, he would have probably been the most dominant player that's ever played the game. But he wanted to prove that he was a great basketball player, not because of his size, but because he was that skillful. And they would throw the ball into the pivot to him. Some people would cut and run by, and sometimes open. He wouldn't give it up. Most of the time, he wanted to score 50 points a game for the year, and he'd shoot a fall-away jumper, which was, he was very good at that. But he would end up, if this was a sideline and the basket was here, when he would shoot the fall-away, he's so big and all, he'd end up almost at the sideline. And he was then out of the rebounding picture if he missed the shot. If he would have just turned to the hoop most of the time instead of the fall-away jumper, guys on the opposing team would say, "Coach, I've got a stomach ache tonight. I don't want to play." That's how dominant he could have been. Well, when he was traded from Philadelphia to the Lakers, the first year Van Bredikoff was his coach, but then Bill Sharman, who had retired from the Boston Celtics, became the coach, and he finally convinced Wilt to play like he should have played. They won 33 games in a row. The Lakers did, set the record, I think, for most games in a row win. If you're my size, if I could get a rebound up there, I would really be struggling to do it, because everybody's so big and a lot of people bigger than you are. You can't turn around and make a real quick, accurate pass down the floor. You're just trying to control the ball and keep it from them taking it away from you. Wilt was so big and dominant, he could get the rebound and turn around and look down the court, and hit somebody sneaking down the floor. And Russell would often get a rebound and throw it out to Cousy or to the point guard. It didn't have to be a point guard. It could be anybody. And wouldn't even come over to half court. Of course, they would go down early and lay it up,
I remember him getting rebounds, and before he got down to the floor, the fast break was started before he reached the floor.
If you were guarding someone on the perimeter and they took a shot, you ran at them to try to block it, but you made sure you didn't foul them. But when you hit the floor, you could just keep running to the other end. Because if they missed it, Russell would get the rebound, hit it to Cousy real quick, and you could have an easy shot on the other end,
Now, Russell and Chamberlain, despite their rivalry, you've told me in the past they were really good friends.
They were, yeah. Unbeknownst to most people, they were very close. The 69, when we beat the Celtics in 1969, we won. When we beat the Lakers in 68 and 69 for the championship. In 69, we were leading in the fourth quarter, I'd say 10 or 12 points, and Wilt hurt his knee, and he came out of the game. They got over there and tended to him a little bit, and Mill Counts, by the way, the guy who the Celtics had traded to Baltimore, was now with the Lakers. And Russell didn't like to guard a guy on the perimeter, and Mill Counts was a good outside shooter. So Counts made about 6 or 8 points and got them back in the game, shooting outside. Wilt was ready to come back in the game. Van Bredikoff wouldn't put him back in because he thought, regardless of how bad you were hurt, you didn't come out of the game, the championship game, you know. Well, Russell was upset that Wilt went out of the game. Russell wanted to beat them with the best they had going. That's the kind of competitor he was, you know. Well, you know, if 2 or 3 of their players didn't really want to play that night, that'd be all right with me. But anyway, Russell and Wilt's friendship really suffered after that because Russell was so mad at Wilt for leaving the game.
In a minute, we're going to open it up for questions from the audience, but I want to just quickly ask you about 2 or 3 other of your teammates that I remember and I'm really interested in. Sam Jones.
Yes. Do you remember Jim Ashmore that played at Mississippi State?
Yeah.
He was a senior when I was a sophomore. He was drafted by the Celtics and went to their training camp. And the last job that they had opened was it came down to Ashmore or Sam Jones. And Sam Jones was bigger, 6'4", and a great athlete, as was Ashmore. But they went with Sam Jones, and he was an all-time player.
Good teammate.
Yeah, oh yeah. And in really must games you really needed to win, he played his best. He was a great teammate.
Did anybody ever use the board better than he?
No, he was a great shooter, but he was a competitor, and he really, when it was important, and when we really needed a basket, if I had the ball, I'd throw it to Sam.
How about K.C. Jones?
He was a great competitor. All of the guys were great competitors. KC wasn't that good of a shooter, but he was one of the quickest athletes that you'll ever play with or play against. And he was there. He and Sam were their guards when they had those really great teams. He played with Russell in college in San Francisco.
Satch Sanders.
Satch was out of New York. He went to New York University, and he was, his forte was defense. He, very good defensive player. They didn't depend on him to score any, and but he was, a great. The atmosphere there in Boston was so different than the other clubs I played on. Other clubs, if we were losing, some of the guys started going for their own points, But the team Boston was so much better than other clubs.
Havlicek came along right at the end of your...
No,
he was after?
he was already with the Celtics when I was...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that when he was...
Yeah,
16?
when Frank Ramsey retired, he was the original sixth man. If they needed a quick basket or two, they would... Ramsey would come in the game, and you knew he was going to be shooting as soon. And he was quick, and he could get open. And, of course, they had so many guys that could score. You couldn't concentrate hardly on just one guy. But then they had drafted Havlicek, and he became the sixth man.
Talk about him as a player.
Well, his heart rate when he was in shape beat about 40 times a minute. So he had incredible stamina, you know. And when I was with the Celtics, he was still the sixth man, but when we got in the playoffs, he played the whole game.
He was like the ever-ready batter. He never quit.
He was like the bunny that never gets out of juice.
That's right. Why don't we see what y'all want to talk about? Bill?
When you were talking about your recruiting, you were talking about your recruitment at Mississippi State, and Kermit Davis Sr., when we inducted him into the Hall of Fame last year, was saying that he's the person that told Babe about this guy in Tennessee that he had played against. Any truth to that?
Yes. Kermit family lived in Middleton, and we were in school together like in the 6th or 7th grade. And then his family moved to Memphis, and then after he was in Memphis a couple of years. He played his high school ball in Walnut, Mississippi. Walnut, Mississippi is 8 miles from my hometown of Middleton, you know, Highway 15. So Kermit and I go way back. And Kermit played at Walnut, by the way, and Kermit Davis Sr., they won the Mississippi High School Championship. They used to have 4 divisions in Mississippi, and of course they were one of the lowest divisions. Walnut's a very small town, but they won the Grand Slam. Then the 4 teams get together from the different class. Anyway, Kermit was the first guy that Babe recruited. And of course, Babe was not in basketball at the time. He was a traveling salesman, I think. But he officiated some games, but he had coached in his previous years. But he asked Kermit, who are some of the other good players, you know? And Kermit said, well, there's a guy at Middleton, Tennessee that you might want to look at, I guess. I don't know what he told him. But anyway, Kermit and I can remember in the 6th grade, we had 2 sections of the 6th grade in my school in Middleton. And every recess we got a softball game. There's Kermit's section against my section. And there was a young man there that was handicapped and wasn't a very good player. And we'd choose sides. But neither one of us wanted this young kid on our team because, you know, he wasn't any help. And Kermit finally said, I'll tell you what, Bailey. He said, I'll take him, but I get to take his last strike. So this kid would get up there and swing it. He would strike out every time. So, but when he got 2 strikes on him, Kermit would take his 3rd strike, and he would stand over there and run the bases, you know. And Kermit would knock it way out somewhere, and the kid really loved running the bases, you know. He was laughing the whole way around. But anyway, Kermit told Babe, and it ended up, you know, that's another reason Mississippi State was a school that I considered, because I knew Kermit very well. We had played summer league baseball against each other and so on.
Would you talk about the hook shot and how it was employed back in your day?
Well, it's a shot that if you're facing the basket and the guy's guarding you, it's much more difficult to get a good, clean shot than if you have your back to him and you hook it out here and the guy's behind you. He has much less chance to block it. And so it's a weapon that's not very often used anymore, but they now mostly jump hook. They jump and hook it. But and when I employed the hook shot, I tried to hook it and roll towards the basket, so if I missed it, I would have a chance to get the rebound. But now the jump hook, you know, you have more difficulty getting to the board for a rebound. But back when the centers dominated the game, most every center shot the hook.
Bailey, I'm a retired basketball official. It took me about 6 years before I could call an integrated team. It took me about 9 years before I went to the big house. My question to you is, when you were playing all-white team when your college days, I never saw you play, but I read about it, but I didn't see you until you got in the NBA. How did you feel playing against a black player when you left college? You never played against him until you got in the NBA.
Well, they're just, to me, they were just another person that loved basketball and loved to play it. And in pro ball, of course, they were doing it to earn a living. But actually, when I was a sophomore at Mississippi State, we went to Terre Haute, Indiana, and played, I think it was Terre Haute anyway. There was a school there that had a holiday tournament. So we went and played, and the first night we played Denver. Denver had 2 African Americans on their team, and actually I guarded one of them. He was a forward, and the reason I can remember, he had an unusual name. His first name was Rosefus, and we played against the integrated team that night, and then the politicians in Mississippi found out that we were playing against integrated teams, and they got real busy, and they pulled us out of, we were supposed to play against Evansville the final night, and Evansville also had an African-American player. So we got on the bus and left. If you can imagine anything that bad.
But you did say it was, you had an opportunity. You had an opportunity to play in the championship. It was not your fault. It was the fault of our leaders of the state.
It was the political leaders in Jackson or wherever, I don't know who had the, but anyway, thank goodness those days are long ago.
My question, how you doing? My question is about how the NBA plays defense today.
Yeah. Well, when the playoffs come around, they play really good defense. Sometimes, you know, you don't want to foul somebody shooting a three-point shot from 40 feet away from the basket. And they're shooting so many of those, it doesn't look like people are playing defense, but they really are. But they just are going to make sure they don't foul the guy and he can go get 3 free foul shots. So but there's some great defensive players up there when they really lock down, and which you'll see in the playoffs. I mean, it's a war.
Bailey over here.
Mr. Howell, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about travel. I know when you watch ESPN today, they talk a lot about load management, and it sounded like y'all played a lot of back-to-back games. You know, New York one night, Chicago another night. Could you
Yeah.
kind of describe what the travel was like? Y'all didn't have private planes back then.
Well, back then, of course, they had a lot of red-eye specials, what we call them. It was airlines that had a late flight around midnight or 1 o'clock. And if we played in Chicago, we'd beat it to the airport and get on a late plane going somewhere to our next game. Well, in Detroit, the Zollner Pistons had a DC-3. The DC-3, when it had a small wheel back here and 2 up here, real broad wings. It would carry about 15 to 20 people tops. And the Pistons, if Fred Zollner wasn't using that plane, when I was with the Pistons, we flew on it to our games. Now, the great thing about the DC-3, it's the safest airplane that's ever flown, has the best safety record, but it's also one of the slowest. We would leave Detroit. If we were playing in Minneapolis, say on Friday night, we would leave on Thursday night going to Minneapolis, because we had to get, if we didn't have a game on Thursday night, you have to get to the place that you're playing the day before, is the NBA rule, so that you don't miss the game if something comes up, you know, a snowstorm or something. We'd leave Detroit, going to Minneapolis, flying in that DC-3, going west against the westerly winds. It would take 5 hours to get there. Today they make the flight in just slightly over an hour, I guess. I don't. So, but today that every team either has a charter that they have the whole year. They have their own plane, and the players actually don't even have to handle their equipment. They have guys that take care of the equipment, and they just shower and dress and go. There's a meal on the plane.
For now, though, help me thank 2 Mississippi treasures, Rick Cooper and Bailey Howell.
Thank you.